The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hong Bin Jung. Starting from the upcoming July BTO exercise, the Housing and Development Board is rolling out a series of major policy changes. Singles will now get more priority when buying flats near their parents. Second-time families will see improved chances of securing larger flats. And there are enhancements to financial support schemes like the Deferred Income Assessment and Fresh Start Housing Grants. But what does this really mean for buyers? Who benefits the most? And what should we be watching in the property market as a result? Well, joining us today to tell us more is Dr. Lee Nai Jia, who's the head of real estate intelligence at PropertyGuru Group. Hi, Dr. Lee. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, Dr. Lee, what policy objectives do you think the new family care scheme is trying to achieve here?
Yeah, so when we look at this new family care scheme, I think the focus is trying to help singles, especially, to stay near their parents. Especially, they need to take care of the parents who are older and, they need help with their daily affairs. So I think this scheme is really targeted towards this niche group to support their parents. At the same time, sometimes their parents also supporting them in other ways.
So how effective do you think this prioritization will be in strengthening intergenerational living arrangements?
I think it will definitely strengthen that particular aspect of living arrangement. We have seen in the past, right, what happens is that in the past, we usually think about intergenerational living arrangements between a young family and their parents or the parent-in-laws. But these days, we see that, from a demographic point of view, there are more and more singles. And these singles also take up the role of taking care of their parents. In fact, most of the singles take care of their parents compared to the young couple because the young couple have to take care of the kids and other things. So we do see that shift, and this particular family care is very timely to address that need and fill in that gap.
Well, on that note, do you think the new scheme gives a good balance to different types of families, whether they are single, second-timers, or existing priority groups? I mean, are there any trade-offs here?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I do think that the new scheme does give a very good balance to the different families. I think in the past, the emphasis is always on young families who are, growing up and become more mature over time. And when their kids grow up, what do we do when the owners become older? How do we allow them to cash out their housing equity? So I think this is really a very good time to revisit this because of the demographic change that we talked about earlier. Of course, there will be some trade-offs. But if you look at the bigger scheme of things, right, how the government is ramping up supply, those trade-offs are minimized because in the past, if there's insufficient amount of supply, then you will see that, of course, giving the singles more options means taking away supply from second-timers, first-timers, or other groups. So when you have this scheme and then you ramp up the supply, the trade-off actually is mitigated in that sense.
Okay. Well, up to 30% of two-room flexi BTO flats and up to 2% of balance flats will be set aside for first-timer singles applying under the new scheme. To what extent, Dr. Lee, then, will this give singles an opportunity to secure a flat? Do you think the new quotas for first-timer singles are sufficient?
I think if we compare to the previous regime, I think that this really gives the singles a bigger opportunity. We see that, the number of flats allocated to singles are usually very small, resulting to a lot of over applications. That means the application rate is very high. It's in the tens or sometimes even much higher. So this change definitely will improve. But, like all quotas, there is never a number that is sufficient in a sense, right? There will always be some people that feel that, hey, despite increasing the quotas, I'm still not able to get the flat. I think when we think about how this quota, whether they are sufficient or not, what it means is that, we have to slowly increase the supply pool. So there's always need to set a particular quota to make sure that, most of the demand for other groups, other competing groups are being satisfied. So then you can increase the quota a bit again. So I think this will constantly review. additionally, 5 years later or 10 years later, our demographics probably will be very vastly different, right? The baby boomers, a lot of them may no longer be here, right? Then you have the majority are Generation X, and they have other preferences. So I think the quotas will have to be constantly reviewed, which the government has been doing so. So I think in the short term, I think they are sufficient, but I think there will definitely be certain gaps. And I would say that, these singles should be patient. If there's certain level of urgency that is required, then maybe they have to relook at the secondary market.
But how might this impact demand and future exercises?
Yes, this is a very interesting question. So when we look at how the demand is, right, I think in the past when singles have much lower priority, definitely this leads to the number of applications actually also come down because they realize that this is probably not the easiest way to get the flat. If they have urgent needs, they will go to the secondary market. Now with this updates, of course everyone will be like thinking that they have a better chance. So we will see the demand actually hike up. There will be a spike up in demand, especially for the Flexi 2R. But I think over time it will normalize. It's just that people will have to recalibrate how the probability work. So I think definitely in the short term it will have a spike up, and then after that the demand should normalize over time.
Well, Dr. Lee, meanwhile, up to 20% of three-room standard flats and up to 10% of three-room plus and prime flats and four-room and larger flats would be set aside for second-timer families. What kind of second-timer families are most likely to benefit here?
Yeah, so when we think about second-timer families, right, there are two groups that are likely to benefit from this. The first group is really the younger family, for those with growing families. So where they have an additional kid, they need more rooms. They also need help in the sense of they may need a helper, and then that also creates a need for more space. So for these second-timer families, definitely it benefits them. They can actually look at such larger flats. The other group is more for people who are right-sizing. These are usually the older families, but maybe still want some more space. So they may still go and, right-size to 3-room standard flats, for instance. So it benefits them in that sense because if not, they will have to exhaust more savings or cash out their equity and use most of that proceeds for their new flats. So I think this is a very timely kind of a policy to kind of like help these families, especially that, they are experiencing those demographic changes.
Okay. And how do you expect this to affect competition then among first-timer families, especially in plus or prime housing projects?
Yes, so I think the first-timer families, based on the past application rates, right, have been fairly stable, even in the plus or prime housing projects. And it's very interesting because, with the plus and prime housing projects, they come with a fair bit of restrictions that may not be appealing to first-timer families, especially for some first-timer families. They are looking to upgrade in the next 5 years. They are looking to expand their family in the next 5 years. So for them, they may choose like the standard housing projects. So definitely for the second timer, which have more cash, to them, plus or prime may be more attractive because they need that accessibility to MRT, especially if they are older or they need it for their kids to go to the schools. So I think in terms of competition, definitely it will not be as significant as we expect. The second thing is that I think the government also ramp up a lot of the supply. So we think about the supply pool being enlarged, so that will also reduce that effect of competition. Definitely there will still be some, but I think the level, it will not be as significant as we originally expected.
Right. And I believe the July exercise would also see enhancements to the Deferred Income Assessment Scheme, and the Fresh Start Housing Grant will take effect as well. How significant is this support for eligible families?
I think it's really very significant for those families that are eligible for it, especially for the deferred income assessment. It will be very good for those, who could now wait and get a bigger flat. Because in the past, if without this deferred income assessment, they will only be able to settle for a much smaller flat. And if they are growing family, then this will also result a lot of movement and churn in the market. They have to change their plans accordingly. So I think this also reduces that kind of tension over time. The Fresh Start Housing Grant, I think this one is extremely good for those families, who have able to stabilize, where the breadwinner managed to stabilize and have a regular income job. This will really help families with children who are staying in rental homes to go to, to have their home that they would need and have some form of stability. And we have seen from research that, children who are in the, self-owned occupied homes instead of public rental homes perform better over time because of that stability. So definitely these two policy changes definitely is very significant for these families.
Definitely. Overall, do you see these policy shifts making, or having broader market implications on BTO application rates or even the resale market here?
Yeah, I think these policy shifts, right, especially when we relate to the deferred income assessment and the Fresh Start Housing Grant, I don't think they have that big impact on the secondary market, resale markets. For the deferred income assessment, definitely we will have some impact on the BTO application rates when we will see some areas seeing a higher rate of application. But I don't think the Fresh Start Housing Grant has that significant impact because that is a very small proportion of the market.
Then could the new family care scheme shift demand across flat types and regions as well? I mean, perhaps more in mature estates where parents are more likely to live. Could this create upward pressure on prices in these areas as well?
Yes, I think this is always a concern that, when we have such a scheme, right, where more people are being able to stay near the parents. Of course, one of the concerns is that it will bring up that price pressure. But if you think about how the family care scheme is being curated, I think the impact may not be as significant as we think it will be. Definitely, it will still have that support level, but there's also the plus and prime scheme. So even though it's a mature estate, you have the plus and prime scheme, that will also help control the upward pressure on prices. So I think overall, generally we should see that, yes, the demand will be definitely there, because there is the greater need for people to stay near their parents to help them age in place. But at the same time, I think the policies there, especially the plus and prime on the restriction on the resale, will help temper that upward pressure.
Well, how do you think the private housing market or developers will respond to these changes?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because every time when we see changes in the public housing market, it somehow will filter to the private housing market because through the secondary market for HDB flats. So in this case, right, in the short term, obviously there will not be any much implications. But in the longer term, especially with the family care scheme at the proximity level, what it means is that families are likely to stay closer to each other. And when they upgrade, we may see two families moving up to a private home. So in today's context, right, when we look at the market, what we are seeing is also that more and more takers for the 3-bedders of the 4-bedroom units in the new launches. So what it means for developers, in the 5 years to 10 years down the road is that, in the future, we may see more and more multi-generation families. So in terms of the design of the development, the unit type mix, I would say that more and more we'll rethink about providing some form of multi-generational aspect to it, such as bigger room size, such as more room unit types. So I think that may change at the middle to long term, but I don't think in the immediate term it will have any impact in terms of demand or supply.
Some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Dr. Lee, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Lee Nai Jia, who is the head of real estate intelligence at PropertyGuru Group. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Zhang.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.